In addition to the weekly feast, you have the monthly feast, the new moon. The new moon gets shoved under the rug, but man, there's so many verses on it. It's often mentioned with the Sabbath and with the annual feast days. The new moon is not the Sabbath, but it is the new moon. It's not a working day. You can look at the list of offerings in Numbers 28. You can find that there are different offerings that are given to Yahweh on the work days versus on the new moons. I tell people that we keep the new moon like a soft Sabbath, meaning that it's not as strict as the weekly Sabbath, but it's not as loose as the working days. So the new moon is a worship day, different from the work days, Ezekiel 46. The new moon is a day of worship just like the Sabbath, Isaiah 66. The new moon is a day to consult a prophet, 2 Kings chapter 4. The new moon is a day of a great feast, an out of the ordinary feast, 1 Samuel chapter 20. The new moon is a day of calling of the assembly, Numbers 10, 1 through 10, as both of the silver trumpets were blown in the beginnings of your months, plural. The new moon is a day of no commerce, Amos 8, verse 5. So on the day of the new moon, it's kind of like a Sabbath, but it's looser in its restrictions than Sabbath. So you might do housework or maybe some yard work, even though you're having a holy convocation and you're worshiping Yahweh or consulting a prophet, but you won't keep it as strict. And it happens on the first day of every lunar cycle, as the months were originally by the moon. You might liken it to the middle days during the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Feast of Tabernacles. Remember, everybody would go to the place that Yahweh chose, and they would stay for 7 days of the feast. Only the first and the last day of the feast were strict no work days, but the days in between were still feast days, where you were still reading the Torah, fellowshipping with believers, singing psalms. They weren't ordinary days. That might be a good way to describe the new moon. That's how we celebrate the new moon in our family, and we've been doing so since 1998. It's a blessing. When the new moon rolls around, especially for a pastor like me, I get an extra day of doing nothing.